Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's another train of thought. Alright. Everybody's wanting to say this and that and the other thing. Yeah, my bobblehead's right there. And, yeah, that's right there. Alright. I'm going to speak today about terrifs. Yes, terrifs. Alright. Did you know that over there in China, workers are not paid at all? The government gives them a stipend from what the government makes selling their products. So everybody gets the same amount no matter what job they're working in or how much they produced. It's all divided to everybody. Alright. Their workers ain't really enthused. You got to think they live 4 to 6 families to a small apartment, because that's all the government wants to provide for them. Alright. I've seen video after video after video of them literally offing themselves over there in China because it's monotonous. You wake up, spend 8 hours in a factory. You can't get what you want when you get off of work. You get limited to going out and seeing one movie a month. Doesn't matter how hard you work. There's no way to advance. You are a slave, period. Only you're a slave to the government. And the government's the entire plantation. The whole country's a plantation for the government. We ended slavery 1860. Alright. Many other countries have ended slavery. Some still have it. There's still slavery going on. And no, I'm not speaking of illegal slavery, such as trafficking of human beings and stuff like that. That's illegal in this country. Why people ain't being prosecuted for it is beyond me, but it's pretty easy to catch. But that's what a Chinese worker is. They're a slave. Either which way you cut it. So I'm more than happy to see 200, 300% tariffs, just like Great Britain did to the United States back before the 1860s. They would actually tariff cotton. Alright, many countries over in Europe tariffed our cotton, including the United States itself tariffed southern cotton because they didn't want the slave trade. So y'all can be sitting there screaming, oh, prices are going to go up and this and that. Buddy, this hobby has become way too massively expensive for the simple fact is everything wants ready to run. Nobody wants to put effort in anymore and super detailing and everything else. They all want ready to run. You know, they want a layout in a box. They don't want to put the effort into making machinery materials. They don't want to put the effort in to actually making something look a little bit more realistic, a little bit more fanciful. They want it pre-weathered, out of the box, put it on the layout, and it's good to go. When I was a kid, we used to get IHC, HO scale equipment. I used to buy the bottom of the barrel and used equipment in HO scale just because it was cheap. I got it home. Heck, I had two Mantua 484 locomotives. I cut them up, built the boiler bigger, and I made myself a big boy. I don't have any pictures of it or anything else. And I made myself a 2-motored big boy that was not as articulated as I'd have liked it to have been. And I actually had to modify the boiler so the boiler swung in half in order to go around 18-inch radius curves. But guess what? It looked good to me. We used to have to scratch build. If we wanted something and it wasn't on the store shelf or it was a $500-600 brass locomotive, we built it for like $30 out of 2 kits or 3 kits or whatever the heck we could find to get enough parts to do it. So everybody out there wants to complain and this and that about these tariffs going to raise the prices on the model trains. you don't realize that the companies themselves have raised the prices on these model trains. They're building them for $2-3 over in China and selling them to us for $200-300. All right, the companies themselves paying their workers and everything else. Literally, if they sold the amount that they were going to sell, they would not have a problem. The only reason why they're whining and complaining right now is because they don't want to go back to the 1930s when they used to sell the kits and people would buy kits and put them together. They don't want to go back to that because that doesn't make them a lot of money, because nobody wants to pay for their own labor. They're paying for other people's labor, and they're paying for that poor Chinese guy and gal that are living, 3-4 families to a 4-bedroom hovel that looks like a high-rise hotel, but it's literally just a bunch of really small apartments that they're packing people into. Alright, so Kato is made in Japan. There's not a high tariff on Japan, so we shouldn't see too much of a price increase. Micro engineering, micro trains, I believe Campbell scale models, I believe quite a few others are still made in America. Alright, North Coast Engineering, last I looked, was still made in America. The last throttle I bought a couple months back, stamped on the back of it, made in USA. I haven't looked at Digitrax. I'm pretty sure that they're made in Canada or Mexico. All the parts for NCE, the computer chips and all, are made in New Mexico and Arizona, believe it or not. So all the components themselves for these DCC systems are made here in America. We shouldn't see a price skyrocket on that. I believe Woodland Scenics, a lot of their products, except for their structures, made in America. Alright, so tell these companies wise up. We need good paying jobs here so that way we can afford to buy the models. Alright, the reason why our hobby has gone so far downhill is because nobody can afford it anymore. The prices become exorbitantly high. And if they want to whine and complain, these manufacturers, about these tariffs, maybe start investing in where your main customer base is, because 90% of the people that buy are here in America. There's actually limited sales across the country, internationally, of American models, because they don't see them every day. Let Bachmann still have its UK division where they're making stuff with Hornby and Triang, which that ain't Triang no more, it's something else. Let them compete with them, Let the Germans have Pico and everything else. If they want to make an American product to sell in the American market, yeah, we buy a lot more model trains than any other country on the planet. So, if they want to make something for the American market, let them make something for the American market. Alright, they're doing it much better, much cheaper than we are, because we don't have the mass production of models and toys anymore. I ain't saying bring back everything, but at least start with the kits. See what happens. You can have a bunch of guys set up a plastics factory. Heck, there's a plastics factory right over here in Hanover, Pennsylvania, that would gladly set up a tool and die so that they could make anything that a hobbyist wants. Most of the time they're only making Rubbermaid tubs, but they have the entire plastics factory, including the milling and everything else, to make the dies, to make the molds, to produce gears and everything else for models. That's in Hanover, Pennsylvania. Right now they're in the hole. They need as much business as they can get before they shut down. And you're telling me that you're so tuned in to that slave labor that you want to continue using slave workers to mass produce a product that you want to sell here in the United States. Why not cut your shipping costs and everything else and make it right here? International models, yeah, you can get some to sell in the United States, but they don't sell very big here. The hobby is here with the American modeler for the American models. Why are we constantly sending it to China to have them make these dyes and everything else, when we could have 10 guys run a plastics factory that's shooting these things out day in, day out, and boxing them up as kits? Let somebody build them, put them together. If I had the money and the infrastructure, I'd be doing that. Instead, you want to whine and complain that you can no longer send your cheap product over here and sell it at 10 times the cost and make money, when all you had to do to begin with was leave that cheap product there and continue keeping your factories open here. Heck, the Lifelike factory's still empty in Baltimore. That big old 3-story brick building, I think it's almost 1 million square feet, empty. Why? Reopen that. We'll gladly take the Lifelike old locomotives, including the spring drives that were in the N-scale locomotives. We would take that and we would improve upon it. We'd take Northwest Shortline, which is an American product, get their daggone gear shafts and replace the daggone thing after we bought it, because guess what? We only bought it for like $50. That's including inflation. With no decoder, DCC ready, but no decoder. And of course those were DCC ready. They had a plastic frame. The point is, the customer at the end is hearing you cry about these tariffs, but yet the customer's been complaining for years that the price is going way too high, and the entry-level kits and everything else are gone that used to be cheaper than buying the ready built. I think the customer's right on this one, and I'm a customer. I don't care what they charge you in tariffs. Build it here, or if you're that headstrong on trying to stay in China, I will no longer buy your product. And I mean that. Total sincerity. If these manufacturers want to continue to use slave labor to build a product to sell to me in a free market society, because they can make it there so much cheaper, because they don't have to pay so much for the labor, then you can stick it right up your tailpipe, because it's rude, crude, and ignorant to expect a communist country, and they are a communist country, to give their people fair living conditions. It never happened when Russia was communist. It never happened under Mao, when he starved 4.8 billion of his own citizens in China. So you tell me, what's more worth it? My money, my hard-earned money, going to a government that's screwing its people and keeping them as slaves, or your bottom dollar? Because I am really getting sick and tired of listening to you complain about tariffs and everything else while using slave labor to make a product because we want it. And yes, we want it, but yet it's hard to come by unless it's mass produced in China. That's why I switched to just buying micro-train stuff. I'm not going to buy your product if I could flip it over and it says made in China, unless it's an absolute necessity. Matter of fact, I'm even swapping to Pico Trap. I never liked it, never liked the design of it, I think it's a little over-engineered, but I'm going to Pico Track. It's made in England. England's got some tariffs, yes, but you know, that's kind of fair because England does tariff our goods pretty much, and they also have certain restrictions on our goods. So I don't care. But I'm switching to Pico Track. I've already bought my Atlas track, so I'm just using the code 80 from Pico for turnouts because I'm replacing turnouts. And that's going to be about $500 out of my pocket going to Pico instead of to Atlas, which is making everything in China. I'm asking all my fellow modelers, if you're willing to stand up and actually say enough is enough. I'm no longer lining these big corporate greedy pockets. I want it made here, or I want it made without slave labor. It's up to you. I'm no longer supporting slave labor. I'm getting out of China. I'm buying as little from China as I possibly can, and have been for years. My suggestion to my fellow modelers, do the same. You'll find that the price will be much less, and the price will actually be competitive with Chinese products for once, because now they're going to pay the difference for the slaves. China needs a big hurting on that. Well, y'all have a good one. I hope that this cleared up some things for somebody. If you got any more questions about the tariffs, or why I consider it slave labor over there in China, or why these companies are whining because they're going to lose a large portion of their money because they can no longer pay the slave wages. Why are we even supporting that? Why have we supported that for the past 40, 50 years? It's time that we stand up and say enough is enough. Our morals should be stronger than the corporate greed. Y'all have a good one.